I'm Rachel from Tyrion's Landing, a podcast member of the Gunna Geek Network, just like the one you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual. Check out all the other podcasts at GunnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
This guy gets more airtime than the Kardashians, right?
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to Earth 2's favorite newspaper, the Starling Tribune. I am the chief editor today. My name is SP, and I have two other reporters with me today for this special episode number 175, starting with Chris.
Alone is what I do best, kid.
Gotta love the kid. And Michelle.
Truth be told, I'm glad you got your marbles back.
Got the marble. You know, when he says got the marbles back, my mind went to looky, who's got hooky.
I did the same thing. I went to Hook. Look, I got my marbles back. And he flies away into the sky.
It was a good Robin Williams show. Back to this one. This podcast is recorded on Sunday, November 12th, 2017, live via www.geeks.live. Remember, folks, our newspaper is full of spoilers, facts, and speculations about Arrow and the rest of the DC TV movie and comic universe, including the most current episodes.
That's right, and this evening we'll be discussing Arrow as well as news, interviews, articles, and announcements that have dropped in the last week that could and very well will impact future episodes of Arrow, as well as the other CW shows such as The Flash, Supergirl, Legends Tomorrow, Vixen, Constantine, possibly Black Lightning, and maybe we'll even go crazy enough and talk about Young Justice coming to their streaming service.
If you're new to the show, thank you for searching us out on the internet and joining us. After the show, you can check out our content at GunnaGeek.com, where you can also find other geeky videos, podcasts, and articles.
Just a reminder, if you are listening or watching live and you want to join our live chat, head on over to www.geeks.live, scroll down to the chat interface that Chris embedded. And with that, Michelle, let's run down what we watched this week.
This week, the episode is Deathstroke Returns, Season 6, Episode 5. It aired Thursday, November 9th, 2017. Director Joel Nova directed 2 episodes of Arrow and has done films such as God's Slave, Day of Reckoning, and Tomorrow. Writers Ben Skolowski, who's done 20 episodes of Arrow and 2 episodes of Flash, and Spiro Sketsos, who's done, this is the first episode of Arrow, 3 Grimm, and 2 of the Drew Carey Show.
Congratulations for getting Spiro's last name correct. I'm assuming that's correct. So way to go, Michelle.
One of these things is not quite like the other.
I like Speedweed. I mean, Speedweed, there's a nice name.
It's interesting. Spiro doesn't have had a lot of credits. So it was just like, I just picked out the Drew Carey Show. I thought that was kind of an oddball to throw in there. Because it's interesting, first episode of Arrow paired with somebody who has written almost a season's worth of Arrow episodes. So,
yeah, definitely trying to bring them on board. That's what I've noticed in the comic book shows. And I think they do it a little bit to make sure that the correct comic book genre history is involved in the show. And I'm assuming they let the newer writer in with all their new creative ideas, because there are a lot of new creative, great ideas to be had. In the meantime, let's switch over to ratings for this week's DC CW TV shows. Supergirl on Monday, the 6th of November, with their 5th episode of the season, Damage, came in with a live rating of 1.87. Not bad, not great, not bad. On Tuesday, the 7th of November, Flash, with their 5th episode of the season, Girls Night Out, came in with a live rating of 2.38, which was a rebound from the under 2 the week before. the week before, by the way, was Halloween night, so much to be expected. And then following Flash, Legends of Tomorrow, with their 5th episode of the season entitled Return of the Mac, came in with a live rating of 1.52. And then slipping over to Thursday, the 9th of November, Arrow, with the 5th episode of the season, Deathstroke Returns, came in with a new, I'm not even going to let you guys guess this time, a new series low of 1.29. Guys, I think this is definitive proof that the app is keeping this show and probably some other shows on CW alive, and they're doing a great job with the app, having all that content available right the next day. I think that was the smartest decision they could have with the commercials. We've talked about it before, but yeah, 1.29, that is slipping pretty low.
I think the app, Netflix deal, and then the DVD and Blu-ray sales must be pretty good because they don't seem too concerned about this. And like we were talking about in the pre-show, nobody heard this. It looks like they're airing an episode Thanksgiving night of Arrow. Let's be honest. Are you really going to be around at the dinner table and be like, hey guys, let's take a break. I got to go watch Arrow now. And everyone's like, what? No. Everyone's going to be recording it that night. So the live numbers seemingly don't matter that much anymore, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I really do wonder what the live +7 is going to be on Deathstroke Returns.
Chris, I think you're too young to remember Thanksgiving night the way I do, possibly Michelle, is that what happened Thanksgiving night is after the football game was over, and there was only 2, it was the Cowboys and the Detroit Lions, both playing their games in the afternoon. That night, there was a family movie on. And for years, it was Mary Poppins or Wizard of Oz. A movie like that was on. And this is before they started the shopping sprees on Thursday night, too. That's what it was. So to have come now into modern day where you've got shopping started the Wednesday night before for the Christmas season, the Black Friday shopping starting Wednesday before, go figure, where you've got football that goes 24/7 seemingly. And when you've got everything else happening, we've got CW coming in with a regular show that night. Supposedly, we'll keep you informed if that changes in the next week. But yeah, Thanksgiving has definitely changed.
It's certainly an indicator right here that they're not so worried about the live showings. And, you know, I can sort of see it. It's kind of the horn we've been tooting for a while. It's been like, hey, the app is a big deal, and it's kind of cool to be proven right, but in a weird way.
What kind of horn do you toot, Chris?
It's a Vuvuzela, the one they had at the World Cup.
Yeah,
Nice.
I do read articles about like ratings and such, and it's almost like critics are like, you know, the big four want to vie for this, and it's like a huge appearance issue. Like if something slips on CBS, the way it's perceived, but then all of them are like, yeah, the CW is the CW, and it will always be the CW. So it is almost like an outlier.
Ooh, that's a good book. Outliers. Ever watch it or read it?
No.
Oh, there's a good book out there called Outliers. You should probably read it. Anyway, let's get back to this episode, Chris. Deathstroke Returns. What was the overall theme?
Hey, some dude named Deathstroke came back. I don't know if you guys remember him.
Kid, I remember a lot of things. Deathstroke was one of them.
Yeah, I almost made my intro quote just be kid, and that was it. I honestly thought about it.
Calls Oliver kid. He calls his own kid. I bet you he calls my grandfather kid.
I wonder if anybody did a drinking game.
We gotta do it.
Just don't drink the water.
We gotta do it.
Did you when Oliver had that glass, he never has a glass in a scene or whatever. Did you think A, it was alcohol, and B, that it was drugged?
A, yes.
Yeah,
B,
I mean-
probably.
Yeah, Slade wasn't drinking anything, so
No, I guess it could have been gin, but it definitely looked like water once they put it down. So it's like, that's just kind of odd. And they made a point for him to be holding it, for him to put it down. He kind of knew what was going on. Deathstroke's back. So since Deathstroke's back, like, gotta talk about the fight scenes because Manu Bennett always brings the best fight scenes. But before we get to Manu Bennett's fight scenes, let's talk about the TV station. Michelle, what do you remember about the TV station fights?
It really wasn't a big one. Dinah is protecting Councilwoman Pollard the entire episode, and Pollard decides to go on TV in order to promote her anti-vigilante act. And Vigilante has targeted her, and Dinah is there and sees him, and then they kind of fight for a little bit, and then they have a meaningful moment, and she lets him go for reasons we will discuss. But the things with her, like there would be like a couple of punches, or like she did the cry in order to take off Vigilante's shield. So it really wasn't fight heavy when it comes to her or the team. The team didn't even get together and fight. So
I'm telling you, when Vigilante was actually shot in the head, I'm like, wow, I wonder what kind of power he has. Well, first of all, I was thinking maybe the visor was bullet resistant, bulletproof, or something like that. Obviously, it wasn't. And I wonder how many visors the Vigilante goes through. But anyway, yeah, in this episode. So the Vigilante's got that going on. And then Dinah with her cry. It was just, that was all a great part of the episode. We'll get to that in a second. But we haven't left the fights yet. Chris, I've left the best fight for you, Deathstroke going after the Jackals.
Oh my God. This is like going back to old school Arrow where bodies drop left and right. There's brutality everywhere. And remember, Slade's not Mirakuru raged anymore and superpowered. This is just a regular one-man army. And it's literally Deathstroke the Terminator doing what he does best. And what he does is not very nice, to steal a phrase from Wolverine. And he's just mowing down Jackals in an absolutely brutal fight scene. He's cutting him down with his samurai sword, shooting him with his submachine gun, and one of my favorite parts, he stabs a guy and then beats him up the side of the head with his machine gun before spinning around and shooting more people. It was intense. It was powerful. It went and showed just what a tank Slade Wilson is, regardless of whether he's superpowered or not. And I loved it. We've gotten some good fights with Oliver, but remember, they're pulling their punches now. Oliver and team, they don't kill unless they really have to. This was a father going to save his son, doing whatever it took, and it was intense, and it was badass, and I loved it, and I hope we get more of it next week.
I actually took the time and started counting the shots because I'm thinking, I wonder if they're going to pretend like this is an unlimited clip in his machine gun. And he was very measured about the shots that he took. He also was measured about the shots that he took with other guns as well. So he might have been out of bullets in his machine gun by the time he got to the end, but they were very short bursts. I think the longest burst was maybe 5 rounds. So if you have a clip of 30, you can do about 6 of those by the time your gun runs out of ammo. So that was actually realistic, although he definitely needed more by the time he got to the end. I got the feeling that he just gave up at the end and was like, okay, I can beat you guys. Just show me where your boss is, because we need to move on here.
I think it was a give up. It was like, I got to your inner sanctum. Now you better listen to me.
I've put the fear of God in you because I've mowed down all of your friends. You better give me what I want or I'll just keep going. Because remember, these guys shot him in the freaking head and his body armor turned that shot around. He has armor on his gauntlets. Like they fired him and he covered his good eye with his gauntlets. He took multiple shots with no damage. I mean, that's where it's a little bit of a stretch of the imagination, because a shot to the head is a shot to the head and that's going to hurt the brain. But he was powerful and mowed everyone down. And this is not a fight that was sanitized for TV. There's blood flying. They're stabbing guys in the chest, and you see the sword blade come at you on TV as he stabs through a guy. It was brutal, and that's probably why this episode, it was probably rated TV 13 or whatever, or maybe even MA, because I didn't check the rating. I should have, because this was intense, and this was a bit more than your typical cable television fight.
It's also 9 p.m.
That's true. That's slightly different at 9 p.m., I guess, too. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, but when you're talking, you're going to put it on the app. It's going to be available whenever later on, too.
That's true, but they still have to deal with the standards and practices for cable television or broadcast television, because they are airing this on the CW. I doubt you're getting an uncut version on the app. Though that being said, I hope there's an uncut version on the Blu-ray, and I would really kill for a behind the scenes on this, how they structured the fight scene and things like that, because that would be really fun to get the behind the scenes on this one.
I know I'm breaking the wall here and I'm crossing the streams, but just after seeing that, I'm very interested in seeing a Deathstroke versus the Punisher fight.
This made it much more. You saw this, and this is when I paused after the end. I went, man, I would kill for them to do even a short run Deathstroke series. I hope that this 2-part arc ends on something that could build towards a series or like a web series they do, even if it's animated over the summer, something like that to give us more of it, because it was really good. And I saw the fans asking Stephen Amell, I think it was on Facebook, hey, how about Stephen, when are we gonna get that Deathstroke spinoff? And he goes, ask Netflix with a question mark.
Well, Stephen Amell's good at asking things and getting them, as we'll discuss later on in the news. So that's a little teaser for later. In the meantime, let's tease what happened in the flashbacks 13 years ago, right, Michelle?
Yeah. As stated before, the producers are like, yeah, we haven't gotten rid of the flashbacks. They're just going to be different. And this time we got a flashback with Slade and his son 13 years ago. They're camping. His son Joe is like, I hope this one actually ends, because Slade is a dad who is away a lot, with the cover story of being a pilot. But Joe's like, we don't get free vacations and all this type of stuff, so I don't think you're a pilot. Eventually, we see that the camping trip just isn't about bonding between father and son. Slade's actually on a mission, and he kills the guy. And what's interesting is that during that scene, he hears a twig break, and then when he takes off his mask, for some reason he takes off his mask and he looks around, there's nobody there. But I'm wondering if Joe saw him. I think Joe saw Daddy kill, and that kind of what leads to him becoming what he is. What do you guys think?
I think you're 100% right on that. And I also think Slade suffers from what I call Peter Parker syndrome in all of the Spider-Man movies, where he takes his mask off for no good reason.
Well, you got to see the mug. You got to get the money shot in there. So you got to take the mask off just to prove that it is who it is. Even if it was filmed with a stuntman, it is, in fact, Manu Bennett underneath there. So a couple of things. First of all, they're looking for Yao Fei. So there's a tie-in to the beginning of the series right there, that was that particular part of the series was going on. And by the way, producers of Arrow, I still want to see that plane crash. Definitely want to see the plane crash of the Australian Information or Intelligence Service plane onto Lian that stranded Manu Bennett there, Slade Wilson. And also, yeah, the whole Ferris Air name drop thing, that was pretty cool. I was thinking, oh, Ferris Air. Yeah, I'll bet you get some good trips out of Ferris Air, like across the universe. Guys, I keep saying that. I really hope that they actually give a Green Lantern nod in the series, because he's not going to be in the Justice League. It
needs to be in Supergirl, not this show. Supergirl is the ideal place to pitch the Green Lanterns out there.
Any one of them I'd be fine with. Let's just do it. I don't care what show it is. I don't care which Green Lantern it is or Green Lanterns, but it would be fun.
I don't want it to be Guy Gardner for the first Green Lantern on TV. He's an a-hole.
I know, but it's a CW, so that's the one it'll give us. Anyway, Chris, what'd you think about this flashback 13 years ago? The whole mechanics of it.
So I did like the fact that it's not the typical flashback as per normal. This is the 5th episode in, and we hadn't really had real flashbacks other than just, here's what happened on the island at the very end of last season. So that felt just like the typical narrative, not the narrative tool of flashbacks like they'd used in the first 5 seasons. So it was kind of nice to have a return to form of, hey, here's a flashback. It's going to mean something in the episode you're watching now. I enjoyed that. That being said, was it necessary? No. Was it fun to see Slade's old mask he had on the island and to see him be the secret agent that was a badass like we saw back then? Yes, it served its purpose. I'm really curious to see how they handle the flashbacks after we get out of this Deathstroke arc. Is it going to just be mini arcs of flashbacks. Like we'll go another 3-episode block and say that's flashbacks of Diggle. Fast forward 3 episodes past that, it's a 4-episode arc of like Black Canary flashbacks to tie into the narrative arc. That's what's got me intrigued.
We'll see what happens. I am looking forward to it. And as long as they continue on this path, I'll be fine with it, because as far as I'm concerned, the season has gone well so far. Of course, we have questions as things go along, but I think it's been going fine for 5 episodes in. I do have questions, though, which we'll get to eventually. Let's talk specifically about Oliver Queen. He is not the Green Arrow. At no point in time does he actually commit an act of violence or shoot an arrow. So this is definitely Mayor Oliver Queen there to help a friend. And in the midst of the investigation, I have all sorts of questions about him being out of town. But for that, he is actually moving ahead, not being the Green Arrow.
Yeah, but it's not like if he goes out of town, isn't that going to trigger some kind of warning? Well, we can touch on that here in a bit. But I kind of like the fact that Slade wouldn't let him get involved. Like he drugged him on purpose. So he's like, you have to keep a promise to your son, be a good father to your son. Like you reminded me I need to do something to that effect. And I like the fact that Oliver calls William or hears from William. William asks if he's coming home. He goes, oh, I'm on my way soon. He goes, but did you help your friend? No. And then you see the look on Oliver's face like, I have to do this. I have to help Slade. So I get the feeling he's going to be a little more involved in fighting in the next episode. I mean, we saw him at the end of this episode take out a goon, take his gun, and kind of do not a parody, but an homage to the Dark Knight movie where he had Bruce Wayne tear apart the assault rifle while he's walking. Oliver does the same with a pistol as he's walking off. So all signs point to the fact that Oliver's going to be more involved next week in order to help his friend, which is what William asked him, or pretty much said, you should probably do that without directly saying that. And maybe that's how he keeps himself from feeling like he's breaking his promise to his son. I don't know.
My biggest issue about him going out of town isn't so much that he went out of town. I mean, it's a poor time to go with the whole anti-vigilante thing happening and such. He tells Renee to be the mayor. Where the bleep is Quentin?
Yeah, that was one of the things that I wanted to get to. Quentin is nowhere to be found. I didn't understand that. It was poorly written out. They didn't even explain where he was. He should have been there in charge of the town while Oliver was gone, or at least taking care of that sort of thing. And he wasn't. So I completely agree with you, Michelle. This was an episode fail for Quentin, not even to be mentioned.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, because he wasn't even in last week's episode.
It's true, but I kind of like at the same time that they're giving Renee more responsibility, because he's growing as a character. He's becoming more reliable in his civilian life persona. So I like the fact that Oliver was trusting him to handle things in City Hall. Should it have been Quentin? Absolutely, because he's the vice mayor. Was it cool that they were trusting Wild Dog to do that? I like that, yeah.
So, Michelle, Felicity is back into Star City, and we're going to have to explain that a little bit, because she actually crossed over herself over into the Flash episode this week with Girls Night Out. And the Agent Watson had no questions about her being in Central City with activity going on over there. I didn't understand that. That was another, I guess, minor, but it's still there. It should have been explained.
Well, Watson doesn't care about the Flash. She's not investigating Barry Allen or Caitlin Snow or any of that. She's investigating Oliver Queen and his team.
But she interviews Felicity, and that should have come up. She should have done her due diligence with Felicity.
But all she cares about is Felicity testifying on behalf of Oliver and her alibis. Look, I'm not saying Watson is the best FBI agent out there, but she's made it pretty clear that her focus is Oliver and possibly now just his immediate team. And questioning Felicity about whether or not she was in Central City is, unless Oliver claimed that she was with him during that time, then that would make a point. But yeah, I mean, it's just Watson being very focused on Oliver and his team.
The big thing is, they said the fact that Felicity's going to perjure herself basically to protect Oliver. Now, the real question is, can the FBI agent make anything stick? I believe we all know what the answer to that is going to be, is no. There's going to be some kind of dramatic tension. It makes it look like the FBI is going to get him, and he'll have some get out of jail free card later down the line, be it that Argus becomes involved, or be it that the crossover happens and the Green Arrow leads a team of superheroes that saves everyone, and that causes the FBI to be called back. This FBI arc does nothing for me. It's not going to do anything long term. I don't think there's any consequences to anything, and it's boring. And honestly, I think the actor who's doing it is trying to play the FBI agent as very straight, without much emotion, cold and unfeeling, and it's boring. I find the character boring.
My mom said the exact same thing. She's like, what's the point to this? What? It's not like they're all going to go to jail, because if they all go to jail, there's no show. So she just rolls her eyes big time when it comes to this. And I think my mom's got a point.
It's a tool to put Diggle in the suit, and I enjoy that. That's fun. I'm sure they could have found some other mechanism to do it, because Oliver's promise could have still happened regardless of this FBI investigation. It just feels like a first half season arc, for lack of a better term, and it feels like in the back half of the season this whole FBI thing is going to be resolved. I just mark my words right here, so you guys can make me eat crow later if you want. By the mid-season finale, the FBI arc is done.
I don't know if it'll be the mid-season finale, but it'll be close, because I'm searching back in the last year and trying to remember when Susan finally left, and I think that was sometime in the spring, but it was an arc that ended way before the end of the season. So I will agree with you. And I know we've discussed this before, but as long as we're talking about this, I just feel the need, I'm obligated to bring up, where the heck is Argus in this whole FBI investigation thing? I really think Argus should be there tempering the FBI, saying, don't worry, he's one of ours. We've got it. That's
the get out of jail free card at the end of all of this, I think, is Argus. Something's going to happen. The FBI is going to roll up and take someone on the team. Not necessarily Oliver, perhaps, but maybe Diggle or something like that. And that's when Argus is going to roll in and be like, hold on, we're sanctioning this op, whether they actually are or not, and get the FBI to stand down. That could be the get out of jail free card.
Well, you mentioned John Diggle, and let's move over to him, because I think he does a fantastic job of trying to interact with Dinah. And Michelle, you have said that these are two colleagues, basically, two friends. There's no shipping going on, no relationship. I totally agree with you, and I think this episode really brought that out, that Diggle and Dinah have a working colleague relationship and not a romantic one.
Yeah. Well, we learned that Vigilante has a close tie to Dinah, and Diggle is trying to tell her that, hey, it's okay that this person is back. It's okay for you to actually want this person to be able to redeem himself, to, show signs of his former self. And it's some really nice conversations that they have.
Well, you mentioned who Dinah is actually focused on in this episode, and we have to talk about it because we've been waiting like a year and a half to talk about it. It's the Vigilante. We find out who the Vigilante is. We find out who's been recast as the Vigilante, basically, and we find out what the Vigilante's relationship is to the team as somebody that we have known, but definitely has been recast. So, Michelle, go ahead. The floor is yours. How'd you feel about the Vigilante reveal?
So the Vigilante ends up being Dinah's ex-boyfriend, ex-partner, Vincent, and he was hit by the dark matter wave during the same night that she was, and he ends up having a healing ability. So he's basically like Wolverine, Deadpool sort of deal. And that's how he was able to survive. And when he gets shot in the head at the TV station, he's basically just pulls the bullet out. Here's the thing that I have with that. First, a lot of us were trying to sort of play detective with it. And it's part of the fun. That was part of the fun of last season with Prometheus, is trying to piece the clues together. And they're just like, oh, by the way, we're going to give Dinah another thing. Wow, I really like Dinah Drake, and Juliana does an amazing job portraying her. I'm not really too sure if I'm enjoying the fact that how she's been instead of Vigilante being connected to Diggle or Renee. I almost thought Vigilante might be connected to Renee. They're giving Dinah. She's basically Jiggle's second in command. She's going toe to toe with Black Siren, so it's almost as though Black Siren is another antagonist to her, another villain for her, and now she has Vigilante, and it's almost like all of a sudden here's someone who's been on the show for one season who's getting better material, better arcs than people who've been there, than Diggle and almost Felicity. I'm sort of surprised at how prominent she's become so quickly.
So I think that's in part because a lot of fans like the character. I for one, am guilty of being one of those. She's become one of my favorite characters on the show in a quick basis because the character's been interesting, and honestly, I prefer her as the Black Canary over what Laurel was in there. And I've gotten into my issues on that in the past, and maybe that's why. It's because it feels fresh and new, but I tend to agree with you. It's a lot for a new character, and I honestly think this Vigilante reveal was lame. It was highly overbilled. Remember last season, like, oh, it's going to be someone you've been introduced to, which sparked all these conspiracy theories. And what it really reminded me of is, you guys remember Battlestar Galactica and like, we're going to reveal the final 5 Cylons. And you remember the feeling of when they revealed them, like, WTF, mate? This doesn't make any sense. It feels like they just threw a dart at a dartboard and said, oh, this is who we're going to make Vigilante be. And I feel kind of like the hype they put behind it was misplaced.
With one of the final 5, at least one of the final 5 being the previously on Battlestar Galactica. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, I got the same feeling here. It was like, oh well, not a big character to begin with. And am I mistaken, or was this actor recast? Because I remember the actor that was shot in front of her during that scene being a completely different actor, and they didn't go back and show that part of the scene either. So that just leads me to believe that this was a completely reshot actor, both my memory and the scenes that are shown in here. I didn't look that up. I should have. But yeah, this is a different guy. For whatever reason, they needed to recast. The actor might not have been available. They might have not have liked him, whatever. We've seen characters being recast before. It's not really a big deal. But when it comes to this, I didn't care. No big. You know what? Even in this series, Sarah was recast from the original pilot episode to what we have now on Legends of Tomorrow. So there's even precedence on the show of that happening. So it'll be interesting to see if they actually reshoot that scene and then reload that episode into Netflix like they did with the original pilot episode. In any event, I completely agree with you guys. This is kind of like a meh. And now it's almost a side story, whereas it was very much prevalent. What is going on here? This is the prime story that I'm interested. Now it's like, I don't care. Hate to say that.
It's interesting. It doesn't live up to the hype. I think that's part of the reason why we're all just a little deflated about it. I'm intrigued by the fact that Vigilante has a superpower, much like Dinah does. I'm curious how that's going to come into play in the future. Is he basically like Wolverine or Deadpool or X-23 to steal some Marvel canon, or to what extent will he regenerate, and how long does it take, and how is that going to come into play in later things? And I want to see him go head to head with Oliver again, because Oliver kind of got his butt handed to him by the Vigilante at points. So I'm curious. They've got me hooked in that regard, but I'm not sitting here like, oh, that's such a great reveal, you guys had me. I'm more like, oh, that's a reveal, I guess. That works.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes in the future. I think in the meantime, all it's done is drug Dinah Drake into Agent Watson's eye as being a possible on the Black Canary. So we'll see where that goes. Again, Chris, you think that's going to be wrapped up relatively soon. So that's 3 or 4 episodes, if that's true. And we'll see if it is or isn't. Let's move on to Slade Wilson's son. We haven't talked about the kid. Kane. I wanted to say Kent.
Or Joe, depending on which name he's going by.
Right. So kind of gave me a little bit of, and I don't know if this is a standard comic art with Deathstroke or not, but it reminded me of the Rebirth Deathstroke title where they were talking about the Jackals and Kane in there. At least that's what I remember reading. And I think they just lifted that story right up, and Kane is now the head of the Jackals. So this is going to be interesting watching this unfold. So let's come up with what we want to call Slade's son. Do we want to call him Kane or Joe? I think Kane is probably better.
He's Kane Wolfman, and I believe the Wolfman part of that is an homage to Marv Wolfman, who's one of the creators of Deathstroke, and I'm pretty sure the Kane has... I don't know. I'd have to go look to find the significance of it.
Yeah, so when we talk about the kid, we can call the kid Joe. When we talk about the operative, we can call it Kane. I think that'll be a nice one. But so I thought that was a nice throwaway to the comics there. Nice little...
So
hey, this is what
you've read the New 52 and Rebirth then, SP, is what you're saying. And this is what they took from that arc there, because it's very different in the original canon.
Yes,
Okay.
I think the Jackals were what I remember straight out of the gate with Rebirth and Deathstroke.
Okay, because in the original series, in Teen Titans, where Slade factored prominently, he had a son named Jericho, who was nicknamed Joey. So I thought that might have been where they were getting the Joe from originally, who then eventually became a member of the Teen Titans. The old Teen Titans continuity is really weird at times, so let's not get into it. But he had two kids at one point that were on there, and one of them was Jericho, a.k.a. Joey.
I'll have to go back and look up. I didn't have time to, since I just watched the episode before we recorded here, but we'll see where that goes. All right, Michelle, your favorite, Mr. Terrific and his balls. We have very little of him in this episode.
Yeah, he's just basically, here's some security footage. Here's where the bullets are being made. Hey, that's just basically it. I mean, it's really interesting. Like, they were planning on going to the television station, but then Dinah's like, hey, the FBI's here, stand down. It really wasn't,
I honestly think he got more screen time on Legends of Tomorrow this week than he did on Arrow.
Yeah, I do too. He actually had lines and a quip and the whole deal. And yeah, that was fun to see him there.
It was. Might have been one of the best parts of the Legends of Tomorrow episode too. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that eventually. All right. It was a good episode. I'm liking this season so far, at least from my standpoint. Chris, what did you think?
I enjoyed it, but we all knew at the beginning of this season when they're doing an episode with Deathstroke in it, that's going to be at the top of Chris's list this season, because Manu Bennett's Slade Wilson has been one of my favorite parts of this series since day one, and he's very high up there on my list of who the definitive Slade Wilson is. I mean, Ron Perlman is amazing as the voice of Slade in Slade Wilson. They don't call him Deathstroke in the cartoon in Teen Titans. But man, I almost want to put Manu Bennett ahead of him.
So we used to rate the villain of the week. Remember, guys? We used to do that. There's no villain to rate here.
Yeah, we could sort of rate Vigilante because he's sort of the villain, but I think we've already made our feelings pretty clear on him that we're kind of like, meh.
Yeah, so we're going to have to figure out something else to rate. Maybe Felicity's dress? I don't know. Michelle, what'd you think about the episode?
I loved the Deathstroke part, and that was, fabulous and cool. And I actually liked the flashback and how they ended up taking this innocent camping trip and tying it into the overall story. I was very disappointed in Vigilante. I was really hoping for someone of more substance. And I actually have to agree with my mother. I tried to defend the FBI agent and stuff, but even now I'm just like, yeah, this really, like, where can this go? Like, they can't all be arrested. There's no show.
This could
unless
be
it's, here's the Arrow team in jail.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this. This could be the exit strategy for Quentin from the show, possibly. I mean, we've had him leave in disgrace before, but if he takes the actual bullet as Green Arrow or something, I can see him sacrificing himself like that.
I don't think he's going to be the one to die if you've read any of the spoilers.
All right. Well, that was just me postulating.
We can get into a spoiler talk later if you guys want. Don't go on the Reddit threads if you don't want to be spoiled right now.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But no, I really enjoyed, the Deathstroke part, and that really saved it for me. That final fight, just blood everywhere. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this saved the episode.
If this is the last season of Arrow, they're definitely going out with a big bang. Oh, and if this isn't, they've returned to their roots. So either way, thank you very much to the Arrow creative team. In the meantime, next week, Michelle, we have a new episode.
Yes, it is Promises Kept. It is season 6, episode 6. It will air Thursday, November 16th, 2017. As Slade continues to uncover clues about his son's last few years, Oliver makes a big decision. Meanwhile, the Green Arrow leads the team into battle against the Dragon, a villain who is stealing valuable tech in Star City. Directed by Antonio Negrete, writers Oscar Balderrama and Rebecca Bellato.
All right, looking forward to that. In the meantime, we have some news to get to. From the Starling Tribune main news desk on floor 52 on Earth 2, we have some Arrow news starting with Arrowverse. Michelle, what do we got?
Yes, the first teaser for Arrow vs. Crisis on Earth X crossover debuted. It shows the assembled heroes of the Arrowverse ready to do battle with the inhabitants of Earth X. The 4-part event will bring together characters from The Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl.
Looking forward to Crisis on Earth X. I've seen these commercials many times as I've been watching the shows the last week or so. So I'm ramped up for it. In the meantime, Chris, we also have another great news story about Wayne Industries.
That's right. So if you guys remember a while back, Stephen Amell as Oliver Queen, name dropped Bruce Wayne. Well, Comic Book Resources was on set with some other reporters and talked to Stephen Amell, and he explained how they convinced Warner Brothers to let them use Batman's real name. He said the original version of the script came out right before Comic-Con. It was just Oliver referencing a famous name. I can't remember what the placeholder was. I think it might have been Justin Bieber. I looked at it and thought to myself, this is a cool opportunity. I talked with Greg Berlanti about it, and Greg said, that it would just behoove you to go directly to Jeff Johns and simply ask. You'll probably have better luck than I would. So, they went directly to Jeff Johns and got the seal of approval to use it. And do we think it's going to amount to anything in there? No, it's just a nice Easter egg and a nice moment where fans be like, oh, they said it! They said the name! That's so cool!
Remember a few years ago when Gotham started up and we were like, oh, how are they going to cross this over? It's between networks. It might not even be the same time period. What's going on here? But we thought for sure there was going to be a crossover because of that Queen Industries building that was in the Gotham first or second episode. So, yeah, we've come a long way since then.
Yeah, Gotham is in its own pocket of time. It feels like the 1940s, but there's cell phones. It's just its own little Elseworld show.
Well, there are 52 Earths in the Arrowverse dimensions, so I don't know. It could be one of those.
That is true.
All right, moving on into the general DC news bucket. Michelle, you have a story about Supergirl.
Yes, Laurie Metcalf will join season 3 of Supergirl as Wynn's estranged mother. Supergirl fans were already introduced to his father, Winslow Schott Sr., back in season 1. Winslow proved himself to be the toy maker, who's a villain. There's no telling if Metcalf's character will share the same homicidal tendencies as Winslow. Metcalf's reason for taking the role is actually pretty endearing. She wants to make sure her daughter can meet her idol, Melissa Benoist, the series star. And that is adorable.
That's cool.
Oh, wow. So wait a minute. Let me get this straight. Laurie Metcalf is playing Wynn's mother and is also Sheldon Cooper's mother on Big Bang Theory?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Got a lot of mom geek going on with Laurie Metcalf. Way to go. Way to embrace it. Really enjoy that. All right. Chris, Heatwave, go.
So you guys do know, we talked about Legends Tomorrow for the last season, all during the hiatus. I love Mick Rory. Heatwave's probably my favorite character in Legends Tomorrow just because he gets all the good quips especially this season's been really good. A side note, him reading Dracula throughout the last episode of Legends Tomorrow was one of my favorite parts, but that's neither here nor there. We do know that Wentworth Miller is returning to the Arrowverse, and we did find out he's not coming back as Captain Cold in the crossover, but in fact Citizen Cold, something we talked about last week, meaning he's a good guy from the other side. So what does this mean for Heatwave? Well, Comic Book Resources spoke with Dominic Purcell to talk about what it's going to be like when he meets the new Leonard Smart. Asked what brings the two characters together, Purcell joked, "Oh, well, the writers brought them together." But on a more serious note, he said, "What I can elaborate on is that the relationship between Heatwave and Captain Cold, or not Captain Cold, Citizen Cold, it's changed. The audience will really see a difference in his character and also how Rory reacts to this new, Captain Cold, if you will. So it's interesting. We're dealing with some really topical stuff." So the dynamic between Cold and Heatwave in season 1 was one of my favorite parts. Season 2 was Mick evolving so that he kind of didn't have his partner to stand with anymore until he was cruelly brought back at one point. This is going to be kind of a nice bookend to that arc to see how he reacts to meeting a Captain Cold that's kind of a hero now, which is kind of what the last Cold was mocking Mick for thinking he was. I'm really intrigued to see it. I think it's going to be a good send-off for Wentworth Miller in the show. And hey, more Heatwave and Cold dynamic. I'm all for it.
Those two have been the highlight for me for Legends of Tomorrow. So it'll be good to see him again, and sorry to see him go, but it's the CWDC universe. You can always see him again. Just we're not expecting them. As evidenced by this last week's, by the way, episode. We've been talking about it for a while of what happened with Legends of Tomorrow. And I'm going to save and reserve my comments for what happened until we talk about that particular episode, because I need some time to deal with the resurrected character, so to speak. All right, something else that has taken a lot of time to come out, but is a very serious subject. And since it impacts the show, we're going to talk about it, but we're also going to talk about it from personal interests as well. So, Michelle, why don't you go ahead and lead off this discussion?
Unfortunately, Supergirl Arrow producer Andrew Kreisberg has been suspended amid sexual harassment allegations. Variety has learned that Kreisberg has allegedly engaged in a pattern of sexual harassment and inappropriate physical contact over a period of years, according to 15 women and 4 men who have worked with him. None of the 19 sources wanted to be named for fear of retaliation. All the men and women who spoke to Variety described similar incidents of inappropriate touching and endemic sexual harassment. They often told the same stories and corroborated each other's accounts. According to sources who either witnessed this behavior or were subject to it, Kreisberg is accused of frequently touching people without their permission, asking for massages from uncomfortable female staff members, and kissing women without asking. Almost every source cites a constant stream of sexualized comments about women's appearances, their clothes, and their perceived desirability. According to many interviewed by Variety, Kreisberg's problematic behavior, particularly around women, got worse once he had a great deal of authority as an executive producer on several shows. The article actually goes into more detailed accounts, which I will not describe here. There's also a comment from a male colleague of his about how he's tried to tell Kreisberg to stop, but either Kreisberg would just ignore him and but almost kind of face retaliation on his part by trying to correct the behavior. So this is difficult because this is someone who, we've talked about repeatedly on the show. We've linked numerous of articles where there's interviews with him and how he's leading Supergirl and the other shows. It's difficult because it's part of that whole, how do you separate the perpetrator from the art that you love? And it's difficult because it's taken so long, because that's another thing that the article describes that's been going on for some time. Someone tried to also report it, but apparently it got brushed underneath the rug, which is something that we're learning over these past few weeks about how it's a repeated behavior, and how it just takes so many people coming forward. To those who have come forward, thank you for your bravery. I know it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult.
I want to extend my apologies to everybody that was offended by Andrew Kreisberg. There is no way that you should have had to work in an environment that you were uncomfortable with. Everybody should be respected in the workplace, including you. So if you're working with the show and you happen to be listening to this, we appreciate your situation and we're sorry about that. The fact that it took years and multiple people to come up and that there was a brushed aside allegation when it looks like, and it appears, of course, this is all alleged right now, that this has happened. It shouldn't have taken this much, but we're at where we're at right now. It is definitely going to impact the shows because Andrew Kreisberg was such a central, pivotal part of the creative process. But regardless of that, there's just no room in that. I keep thinking of, what if it was one of my kids? Doesn't matter which one, my son or my daughters were working on this set. I would not want them to have to put up with this behavior as it has been purported to have been from Andrew Kreisberg. So I'm glad, if this is true, that the CW has taken the steps of the suspension and are moving ahead with positive corrective moves for the rest of the cast and crew of the shows. So
I echo what the both of you say, and also one thing to keep in mind, I understand if there's some fans out there that say, hey, in light of all this, I just don't want to watch these shows anymore. I just can't get past the fact that these superhero shows, these shows I've been watching, have had someone like this behind the scenes pulling the strings, doing these kind of things. It's a very tough thing, like Michelle mentioned, to try and separate the artist from the art in this case. And I talked about it on a different show today, and there's some stuff, like for instance House of Cards, I can't wrap my head around finishing that now. I love House of Cards, I loved Frank Underwood and things like that, but I can't separate the actor from the art there. And I understand that. I get that. No one's going to judge you on this show or anywhere else should judge you if you say, look, in light of everything that's gone on, I'm taking a step back from these things. I just can't put myself in the right headspace because I think about that this guy was involved. So please don't think anyone's going to judge you if you say, I need to take a step back from it all, because we're all having to deal with that in different ways, because the floodgates have opened. We're hearing about all sorts of people, and it's going to hit people differently depending on their experiences, depending on the show or the actors involved, because everyone will react differently to those things. So please do what you need to do. Best for you, everyone.
Well put, Chris.
Yeah, he's of course denied these allegations and everything, but one of the things I want to point out is women have to put up with this, not just in the entertainment industry. It's everywhere, unfortunately. You do not have the right to anyone's body. And there are people out there that think that because they're around a woman, that they can just go up and touch their shoulders or go in for some, what they think is an innocent kiss on the cheek of like, hello, or something. Or anything like that. It's like, no, you don't have that right. Even, and here you are, if you're like the boss and you're coming in for a kiss, and sometimes those who are like, they work for you and they know how much power you have, they don't know how to react. And it depends on their, background and such. So sometimes women will just stand there and like take it, because unfortunately many of us have been conditioned to take it. Amy Poehler, to paraphrase her, she said that women we take years to unlearn all these things that we've been taught. And for those of you out there, you need to realize that your body is your own. You have the right to say no. I am an advocate for kids to not being forced to give hugs to relatives. I always, you never should even do that. You should never be like, oh, there's your cousin, give him a hug. Like, no, if your kid doesn't want to do that, don't. Everyone has the right to body autonomy. And you as a boss, you're in a position of power, and you will put people in an uncomfortable situation if all of a sudden you feel like going in for a hug for hello or something like that. You have to stop yourself, and you have to realize, am I making this move with that person's consent? And that's where a lot of this is coming from. You really need to check yourself.
Well said. There was a lot of things that we discussed here. This is a serious topic. I'm glad that we have taken the time to address it in the time that we have in this podcast. If more information comes out that is relevant to the show, we will definitely be talking about it as well. But this was something that was important that we felt like needed to be addressed, and I'm glad we took the time to address it. Before we move on, any last words, Michelle and Chris, on this?
And like Michelle mentioned, we do have to keep in mind he hasn't been found guilty of anything yet. But let's be honest, where there's smoke, there's fire. And last I'd read, there were potentially 15 different accusers on here. So I don't tend to think there's a conspiracy that 15 people got together. And I wish that it hadn't happened, but it sure seems like something had happened. And I have a feeling that we're going to be talking sometime in the next 6 months about how he's been removed from executive producer on Arrow and on Supergirl and any other shows he's involved in.
Yeah, I was very careful to say alleged because it is alleged, but I agree, Chris. This is way too many corroborated stories to brush aside without acknowledgement that this has occurred. And I think the CW, with the information that they had available, probably did the right thing, or Warner Brothers in this case, did the right thing. So we will see where this goes in the future. In the meantime, there's a lot of other really geeky stuff on the network that we are. In case you don't know, Starling Tribune is part of a network called the GonnaGeek.com network, and there's a bunch of other podcasts on the network, right, Chris?
That's right, and we've got 20 plus different shows in the network that cover a variety of topics. You're familiar with us on the Starling Tribune. We cover the Arrow universe, specifically the TV show Arrow. Well, there's other shows that cover a variety of different things, gaming, geek culture in general. And each week we try to highlight one specific episode to give you a taste. And I promise I'm not being self-serving here, but I want to talk about episode 286 of the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast entitled Stroke That Chin Hair. And why I wanted to bring it up is because we touch on this same topic in there, which is the allegations to Andrew Kreisberg and other folks. And we spend about 30-35 minutes talking about how do you separate the artist from the art? Is it possible? And we try to have a more serious conversation on it. And on top of that, Willie tells us some adventures of his personal life when he went to a club the other night. And finally, we wrapped up with some news such as Rian Johnson getting the next trilogy of films and some guy named Brian Michael Bendis moving to DC Comics. And what could this mean going forward? And I'm sure we're going to touch on this in a second. So go check out All Things Good and Nerdy and all of the other awesome shows in the network over at GonnaGeek.com.
Yeah, the Brian Michael Bendis thing was just huge in the news, and we had a chance to talk about it in a couple of different forums, not on this podcast. So if you want to check out a great conversation on that, go and listen to ATGN number 286 on it. But it's a big thing. Brian Michael Bendis is a huge Marvel comic book writer that has influenced a lot of the younger crowd in the Marvel comics, and it's just great seeing him to move over to DC. And I asked Lauren when we were discussing this on Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. where she thought that Brian Michael Bendis would be writing and where she would want him to write. So, Chris, do you have any thoughts on which titles you want to see Brian Michael Bendis write on?
Batman.
That was the first one that I brought up. Michelle, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, Batman is a good idea. Maybe Green Lantern. I don't want him to take over. I know he wrote multiple titles for Marvel. I really don't want that to happen at DC. So, yeah, I just hope they don't give him something like Wonder Woman and let him just change everything or something like that. I mean, I respect him a lot. I just don't want them to give him the keys to the kingdom, and then he just all of a sudden takes over everything, and everything's made in his image.
That's a good point.
So,
They probably have to pay him a lot of money to bring him over like they did to remove him from Marvel. So he's probably going to be involved in multiple titles, though.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind is there's a lot of internet rumors about what he's doing. And he made a point of going on social media and saying, look, all of these guesses you guys are making are wrong. My guess is they haven't even assigned the book or books he's going to be doing. It's all part of some ongoing conversation. He might be doing one of the next crossovers. Who knows? I know that like the noir and the pulpy things and detective things, that is really in his wheelhouse. Because remember, anyone who's read Alias, aka Jessica Jones, and some of his other things, that's really good for him. And putting a new slant on an established character like Ultimate Spider-Man that he worked with Mark Bagley on for 140 straight issues. He's a very talented writer, but you have to put him in the right thing, because sometimes you read a Bendis book and you're like, why is he writing this? I don't understand.
Lauren brought up the fact that he was behind Civil War II, and we all have strong feelings. Those of us that have read that have strong feelings about that, specifically the way, in my opinion, the way that Captain Marvel was portrayed. So, yeah, he's had his hits and misses, and I'm glad you stated that he does well with the serialized noir.
The more interesting thing will be, is rumor has it Jonathan Hickman is either has signed or will be signing a deal to go to DC as well. So if Hickman's going over there, now I just saw this on the internet. I have not confirmed it anywhere. I just saw it and went, oh, if this is true, that sucks. But Hickman could do some real cool stuff in there, because he does these massive world building, cosmic kind of things. And imagine giving him like the Green Lanterns book or something like that. That is going to be really cool.
Yeah, Justice League or something like that. Because I'm really enjoying his independent titles too, that he's written recently or in the process of just starting up. So Jonathan Hickman has some things in the fire. All right, we've taken a lot of comic book time. I think it's time to close this one down, Chris.
I think you're right, SP. So as we close things down, a big thank you to everyone who did watch live today and participated in our chat over at geeks.live. Also, a huge thank you to anyone who downloads the replays available on our website over at starlingtribune.com, or rewatches the video or watches the video over on the Gonna Geek YouTube channel.
Yeah, just remember, you can always catch us live at geeks.live, 6 p.m. Eastern or 3 p.m. Pacific on Sundays. And you can check out all of our other content. And you can check out all of our other content at gonnageek.com.
we would love to hear from you. We are the Starling Tribune on Facebook and Instagram, at Starling Tribune on Twitter, and you can call us at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-28. And I really do appreciate those. That we had a YouTube comment that was very thoughtful. Unfortunately, for time, we couldn't get to it. And we actually heard from someone who listens weekly on Twitter. So thank you very much for that. And this brings us to the end of another great episode. Any last words before we sign off? At Stargate Pioneer.
Hashtag where's Argus?
At the Chris Farrell.
Hashtag give me a Deathstroke series now.
And I am at Michelle Ely, signing off with hashtag Thirsty for Kane. Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at gonnageek.com or check out our archive at starlingtribune.com. Visit gonnageek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.